Good morning everybody. Good morning. So I'm Laura Izarra, I am Associate Director for National Cooperation at USP International Cooperation Office, and I will coordinate the activities this morning. I would like to express our satisfaction for receiving DFG's workshop for Germany and the Academic Excellence Initiative. So I would like to call Professor Vahan Agopian, Acting President of USP, to say a few words.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our President, Professor Marco Antonio Zago, I would like to welcome all of you in this meeting. And first of all, to thank you very much to having this meeting at USP. It's our privilege, it's our honor to have you here to discuss this very important topic. I would like to thank the support from the German Consulate, and the Vice Consul is here with us. His support was very important. DFG, which really also supporting and sending representatives to share their expertise in this subject. And thanks very much for you attendees. That the number of and the importance of attendees show how this subject is very much considered in our country. And I hope that this workshop helps us to, let's say, to make it stronger, our ideas, and to fulfill, to have a similar initiative in Brazil. Thank you very much.
Professor Raul Machado, President of USP International Cooperation Office, will address to you on behalf of AUCANI.
Thank you, Professor Laura. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to the workshop that we will discuss the excellence initiative of the German Federal Ministry of Education and Research and the German Research Foundation. Since Catherine Winkler arrived to São Paulo, we from AUCANI, we from Graduate Provost Office and from Research Provost Office, we look forward for this opportunity and to establish a fruitful relationship with German Research Foundation, DFG. We already have a significant partnership with German universities. We collaborate with 53 universities under 86 agreements. And between 2010 and 2016, we have published jointly 3,521 papers, among which 2,176 with the top-ranked universities in Germany according to QS. And this is a great opportunity for the University of São Paulo to strengthen international cooperation of research with German university. Now a little short story about USP and Germany connection. Last June, I was invited by Humboldt University for the celebration of 250th anniversary of Wilhelm von Humboldt. And on that occasion, I told them the following. At the beginning of the 20th century in Berlin, at Kaiser Wilhelm Institute für Biologie zu Berlin, Professor Karl Kochens, a rediscoverer of Mendel, had a great talent assistant called Frederick Gustav Brigger, that in 1936 had to leave Germany. And in England, he met Professor Melo Moraes, Dean of USP Agriculture College, that hired him to establish the areas of plant cytology and genetics at USP. He was not only important for the consolidation of genetics in Brazil, but he was also decisive to establish the full-time professorship for the entire University of São Paulo. Full-time professorship, which means association of teaching and research which means also the practice of Humboldt ideas. This short story put together Germany, USP, Mendel, and Humboldt. We consider this workshop an opportunity to know new ways to promote cutting-edge research, to strengthen our international collaboration through clusters of excellence. Thank you for the presence of all. Thank you.
Now I will call Professor Eduardo Krieger, Provost of Research at USP.
Good morning. It's a real honor and a pleasure to have this meeting at USP. I think this is a very symbolic meeting, workshop. There are global challenges that involve how to sustain universities in general, and in particular, which is of great importance for the University of São Paulo, is how to sustain a research university. I think this is a challenge for everyone involved in this field. We're going to have to be very creative in the future. We have unique opportunities here in Brazil. We are blessed with the possibility of having defined income from the state, and we have to take advantage of that. Few universities in the world have this advantage that we hold at the University of São Paulo, together with the co-sister universities in the public system in the state. Unicamp and Unesp are the other two. The challenge here, and that we would like to learn with you from Germany, is how to make choices, how to prioritize things, and how to convince the public, our colleagues, and the people in the executive and legislative office that are the one distributing the money, how to do that in a non-homogeneous way, take it into account excellence, and how the universities have to adapt to that. So it's really all stakeholders have to do their homework, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So this is a great opportunity for us to exchange information that I think some of them will be directly applied to the challenges that we have for the next 4 years, while we have here the future president of the university that now in this still holds the vice presidents. So I thank you all, and I hope we're going to have a very enjoyable and profitable exchange of ideas. Thank you.
And I would like to call now Mr. Jens Gust, a German Vice Consul, please.
Dear Professor Vahan Agopian, Professor Raul Machado, Professor Krieger, dear Katrin Winkler, dear guests from Germany, Dr. Werberger and Dr. Oliver Wigner. Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here this morning and to say a few words at the opening of today's workshop and on Germany and the Academic Excellence Initiative. First of all, I would like to say that the partnership between Germany and the University of São Paulo is something for which we are very grateful and very proud of. With its numerous strategic partnerships with German universities and research organizations, the alliance between Germany and USP is diversifying and deepening every year. This serves, in our view, the internationalization of both our country's scientific landscape, as well as the development of good and strong networks in order to work together on today's most challenging problems. Regarding FAPESP, we are equally happy about the sharp partnership between DFG and FAPESP. Last year, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of this cooperation, which has been very successful, and I'm sure the DFG and FAPESP, as two houses of excellence, will continue to inspire each other also in future. Looking at the great number of common research projects, scientific cooperation has clearly become a centerpiece of German-Brazilian relations. The biggest number of agreements between Brazil and Germany during the first intergovernmental negotiations in Brasilia in 2015 was reached in the area of research and innovation. In our view, these agreements have been a case in point for a more general pattern of the foreign policy of Germany and, as I see it, also of Brazil. We are both more than ever dedicated to international cooperation and to productive partnerships. And we both want to foster the result-oriented cooperation between science and research on the one side and our economies, our companies on the other. In that context, Germany welcomes all positive signs of an economic recovery of Brazil and the reform efforts of Brazil to overcome the economic crisis of the last few years. To us, it seems clear that the improvement of the economic situation will also further increase the possibilities of Brazilian science and research institutions for international cooperation and exchange in general, and for our bilateral cooperation more specifically. In conclusion, I want to say a brief word on the DFG. We are very happy that the DFG has developed a strong footprint in Brazil and has been cooperating very successfully with Brazilian science and research institutions as well as funding agencies, in particular with CAPES. As I was told, as a result of that cooperation, for example, more than 230 bilateral German-Brazilian projects were funded by the DFG in the time from 2009 to 2017. In our view, that is brilliant and seems a very good basis for an even more intensive cooperation in future. In that spirit, I'm very glad that we have come together this morning to learn more about the state and possibilities of the German Excellence Initiative from DFG, as well as about the joint programs of DFG and FAPESP, and that we will also get first-hand information about the Brazilian Excellence Program and its role in the view of USP and FAPESP. Thank you very much for coming. I wish us all a very interesting workshop. Thank you.
We will proceed now with the next panel. So, I would like to call, in order to start our activities this morning, I will call the speakers of this first panel, Dr. Catherine Winkler, head of the DFG office in Latin America, Dr. Klaus Verberger, Vice Director of the Department for Coordinated Programs and Infrastructure, Dr. Oliver Wegner, a Program Director and Coordinator of the German Excellence Initiative at DFG, and Professor Carlos Gilberto Carlotti, Provost of Graduate Studies at USP.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting us to give this event here, for inviting our guests to speak about the Excellence Initiative, and for giving me the chance here to present you a few of our joint programs between DFG and FAPESP. So before we come to the actual content of our event, I would like to give you the information, since we are in the state of Sao Paulo and since there are very many good opportunities for joint collaborative activities between German researchers and researchers from the state of Sao Paulo. Before I come to those joint programs, I would briefly introduce to you what the German Research Foundation is. The German Research Foundation in principle is a bit like the FAPESP, but responsible for funding research projects in entire Germany. So we are Germany's largest funding organization for curiosity-driven research, and we also call ourselves Germany's central self-governing research funding organization. And that has quite some implications. Although we receive public money, so money from the federal and state governments of Germany, we are somewhat independent in our boards are located scientists of German scientists which have the majority of votes in principle to determine the policy of German research funding and also to decide on funding programs and projects. We are organized in principle, to make it simple, as a club, and as every club we are having members, and our members are German universities and research institutions. We have administrative autonomy, and we work according to the bottom-up principle, and that means that we are serving all branches of science and humanities. And so with an annual budget of about 3 billion euros, we are funding about 30,000 projects every year. Although the German Research Foundation is a national funding organization, the international collaboration between Germany and foreign countries is a very important component of German Research Foundation. Why is that? Because I think this is quite obvious in these days, because research transcends national boundaries, and also certain topics are being best researched within the framework of an international collaboration. I think climate change, question of climate change, energy, but all other scientific questions are good examples for working in an international collaboration. How are we doing this? The DFG has a variety of agreements between all kinds of countries in the world, and also we have some offices worldwide, one of which is the office here in Sao Paulo, being responsible for international cooperation between Germany and Latin American countries. So we are not only responsible for Brazil, but also for all Latin America. Very briefly, what we do here, and this is also to invite you to contact us if you have questions. We are serving as a contact point for you who are interested in a collaboration with a German scientist, or if you are interested to go to Germany to spend a research stay there. So we provide you with information about the German research landscape, about opportunities for funding. And another aspect, of course, is also to maintain our good partnerships with partner organizations here in Brazil, such as FAPESP, such as CAPES, and other state and federal funding organizations of Brazil. In that way, we are very strongly focusing on developing joint funding instruments in order to enable you to work with German researchers. This is only an overview about our agreements we have in Brazil at the moment. So our longest agreement is together with CAPES since 1995. Since 2007 we have an agreement with CNPq. A very good functioning agreement is together with FAPESP. since 2006, which was renewed in 2011 and 16 last year. Also, we have a long-standing relationship with PAPEMIC since 2009, and in 2014 we signed an agreement together with FAPERJ from the state of Rio de Janeiro, and opened the first call together with them. At DFG we have a variety of about 35 different programs, I think, and what is important for German or for researchers in Germany who are eligible at DFG is that in principle in all our programs they can apply for funding and international collaboration. We have modified our programs in a way that we have now a module for international collaboration, and which can be in which you can apply for funding research stays, visits or workshops and so on. But we are using a few programs more often, and I would like to briefly introduce to you those programs. This is, for instance, the program Initiation of an International Collaboration, which serves as a first contact possibility for discussing ideas and for figuring out maybe a joint research project. Once you have done this, you may apply for a bilateral collaborative project to really work together, to do research together, which provide you with funding of about 3 years, funding at the German side, personnel, consumables, everything what you would need actually for the project. And you here as a researcher in the state of Sao Paulo, you would have to apply or would receive funding provided by FAPESP, for example. If you have a broader scientific topic, an interdisciplinary topic, and a variety of researchers you would like to incorporate in order to work with them towards this research topic, you may think of applying within our joint programs, joint coordinated programs or collaborative programs that involve various scientists, between 5 and 15 scientists, more or less. Then you may apply for instance, for an international research training group, which combines research and internationalization and also training of PhD students. You may think about applying within a research unit, a bilateral research unit, which does not imply a training component, but is in principle a collaborative research program which goes beyond an individual research project. Or you may even apply in a so-called collaborative research center that is even bigger research consortia of about 15 to 25 PIs, to give a rough number. Those programs run for a time period between 6 and 12 years. And what is most important here is that since, as I said before, and DFG is a national funding organization, we work on the principle of matching funds. That means we need a partner organization that provides funds for the Brazilian side. And since we are in the state of Sao Paulo and have a very good agreement with FAPESP, you may apply in all those programs I was introducing to you for funding your research here in the state of Sao Paulo together with the German researchers. Very quickly to our cooperation with FAPESP. We provide funding for the initiation of a bilateral collaboration, so you may apply for funding for mobility, to visit somebody in Germany, to invite somebody to come over here to Sao Paulo. You may apply for funding for a bilateral workshop. And at DFG we have this program which is called Initiation of International Collaboration, which has a duration of 1 year and provides funds for up to 3 months within 1 year, for all those items I just mentioned. And in FAPESP you have a variety of international programs you probably will know, which you find also on their website, and which you would have to apply and combine the proposal together with the German applicant. As I said, once you have figured out a new joint program, you may think about a joint research project, and you are very happy that you are in the state of São Paulo, because FAPESP is the only organization we allow for the continuous submission of a joint research project between Brazilian and German researchers. So in the last year we modified this joint program in a way that now you have the possibility to apply for a joint research project for a duration up to 3 years, which may be renewable even on the Brazilian side here. You would in parallel submit the joint research proposal, and the joint research proposal would have to have one joint research kernel, so that it should be identical with regard to the scientific part of the proposal. And as I said, there are no submission deadlines, so we have no calls together with FAPESP, but in standing open calls, so to say. So you may apply at any time a joint research project to FAPESP and at the same time to DFG. At DFG, the program is called Research Grant. At FAPESP, the program is called Auxílio à Pesquisa Regular. I think everybody will be will know very much about this program at FAPESP. In this program, we have still separate peer review procedures according to our rules at our both organizations, but we have a joint decision. That means only if both organizations would like to fund the projects, we will jointly fund the project. If one organization says we don't want to fund it, then unfortunately the project won't be funded at all. Now, if you have a broader topic you would do research on, and if you know a group of researchers here in São Paulo you are working already with, and also a group of researchers in Germany, you may consider a collaborative research project. And those, as I said before, those joint programs offer a budget for a longer period of time, so between 6 and 12 years. And we have developed last year not only the opportunity to submit a joint collaborative research project, but also a joint evaluation procedure together with FAPESP. So what you would do, you would figure out your research proposal, you would write down a joint research proposal again, according to the specific programs at DFG and at FAPESP. And you would submit, in parallel, submit the joint research projects to FAPESP and DFG. Again, it would be the same scientific project kernel, and again, there are no submission deadlines. But what is important here is that we are following a two-stage submission procedure. And at FAPESP, you would submit your proposal according to the program Auxílio à Pesquisa Projeto Temático. And at DFG, the Germans would have to look at our program portfolio and would consider either the program International Research Training Group, which has a duration of 9 years, or Research Unit, which has a duration of 6 years, or even a collaborative research center, which would have a duration of up to 12 years. You would, at the German side, we would receive a concept in the first phase, and here at FAPESP, you would simply contact FAPESP for submitting a short abstract in order to figure out whether or not you're eligible at FAPESP. We figured out a joint evaluation procedure. That means we would do an evaluation as we are doing it in Germany at DFG. That means we don't have written peer reviewing procedure, but we allow for a panel meeting in which the researchers jointly present their research projects and are being evaluated by a group of researchers at the site in Germany or in Brazil. All projects, you won't receive funding for the entire time of the program, but they are separated in different evaluation rounds. That means, for instance, for an international research training group, you would have a first funding period of 4.5 years, for a research unit of 3 years, and for a collaborative research center of 4 years each phase. Again, here important is we only fund the projects if both sides would like to fund the program, but since we are doing a joint evaluation, there's a high probability that if we decide on funding, that also the other side will fund, of course. As an example, we already have an international research training group. Very briefly, we have this in physics. It's called Dynamical Phenomena and Complex Networks. The objective, very briefly again, is structured training of PhD students under excellent research conditions with supervision and international exchange. That means we have a group of researchers working towards a topic. We have 10 to 15 PhD students on each side working together. We have interlinked sub-projects inside this program, and which allow an international exchange of PhD students. That means every PhD student would have to spend 6 to 12 months in the other country, which would be part of the PhD thesis of the individual PhD student. At the German side, we allow a budget of about 1.5 to 3 million euros roughly for a funding period of 4.5 years. And yeah, to the submission procedure, I think I said a few words. If you have detailed questions, please contact us after the event, then I could give you some more explanation how to proceed. Now, very briefly, a few numbers. We observe that the joint publications between Germany and Brazil are increasing or have increased in the last year, since 1999, as you can see. And we observe that apart from physics and astronomy and astrophysics, which are classically very strong fields, and joint publication, we see a strong areas in chemistry, material science, environmental sciences, neuroscience and neurology, and biochemistry, molecular biology. If you have a look at our funding statistics, and here you see our DFG funding statistics between 2009 and 2017, you see that in this time period of about 8 years, we have been funding 233 projects or even more, with a budget of at least 43 million euros. These incorporate all research projects being either unilateral funded or bilaterally funded together with the Brazilian funding organization. And you see here that we have a strong focus in engineering sciences. About 30% of projects being funded are in engineering sciences. This is because we have a very strong initiative together with CAPES in manufacturing engineering. We have a strong focus, of course, in physics, since we have this international research training group together with FAPESP, and also classically geoscience is very strong, and also chemistry. But I think in general we have a good distribution about the areas of research. And maybe a few numbers from the state of São Paulo. 70 out of 233 projects are within the state of São Paulo, or including researchers of the state of São Paulo. And even 40 of 233 projects are together with scientists at the USP. And I think this is quite a good result for USP as well. Now, what you see here on the right-hand side of this slide, you see that about 50% of projects and 50% of mobility projects are being co-funded already with the Brazilian partner organization. I think this is a very good sign for our collaboration and our activities here. But still, and I think we are on a good way together with our strong partner organizations here in Brazil, this can still be increased. And this is in principle what I wanted to introduce to you. We are, of course, we have a lot of further ideas how to improve the opportunities for researchers. And here in the state of São Paulo, for instance, we would like to create a small program for young researchers in order to support the internationalization for young researchers. And we are strongly focusing on promoting our joint activities which is very important since we don't have calls, we don't launch calls. I have the feeling that sometimes researchers are not aware of their opportunities. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And as I said, if you have further questions, please feel free to contact us here in our office, which is in São Paulo, Granja Julieta. We are always are happy to answer you any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me thank you, the President-elect, for inviting us to Sao Paulo, to this wonderful university. And thank you to the audience for your interest in this workshop. My name is Klaus Herberger, and at the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, together with Oliver Wigner, we are part of the team organizing the German Excellence Initiative. And my presentation will have two parts, and then Oliver Wigner will add some more details on operational aspects. The first part will be about the past, about the experience in Germany with the Excellence Initiative, which started in 2006 and is ending more or less this year. And then the second part will focus on the so-called excellence strategy, which is a kind of continuation of the Excellence Initiative starting next year. And right now we are in the middle of preparing for this next phase. What was the idea behind the Excellence Initiative? Early in this century, there was a consensus in the European Union to raise the level of funding for research and education. And as part of that joint effort, German government decided, yes, we also need to increase our spending. And part of that increase was the Excellence Initiative. The first idea presented by the government was to just select maybe 2 or 3 German universities and to give them a lot of money, so to make them into a German Harvard or MIT or Oxford or whatever your favorite universities may be. When this was discussed with the German Research Foundation, we said, well, maybe that's not the best way to spend the money, because excellence in research in Germany is distributed a bit more widely. Some universities are very good in one area, others are very good in another area, and also we do need more reforms at the graduation level. So the Excellence Initiative then developed in 3 funding lines. The overall aim was to strengthen Germany as a research location, to make Germany's research more competitive, to make Germany more attractive for researchers also from outside of Germany. To do this in the segment of top-level research, there are different functions, of course, in the research system, and the function of the Excellence Initiative was focused on top research. At the same time, it was clear that not all the universities are the same, and a specific aim of the Excellence Initiative was to increase the differentiation in the German research system. And that's not necessarily a differentiation into strong and weak or good and bad. It's a differentiation in maybe top-level research, maybe top-level education, maybe top-level academic, basic curiosity-driven research, and maybe top-level applied research. Here the focus is on top-level basic research. And then, of course, it was recognized that in order to do this, you do need cooperation networks within the university. You need networks with partners from industry, but also other partners like museums and whatever is appropriate for the topic of research. And to do this, as I mentioned, you need to increase the level of funding, and we have been fortunate to really receive fresh money for new ideas. The three funding lines I mentioned are, first of all, the graduate schools. In Germany, the starting point was that in many cases there is an individual relationship between a doctoral student and his supervisor, Doktorand und Doktorvater. The duration of a PhD program was very individual. The level of supervision was very individual. And the graduate schools had their aim to promote early career researchers such that they can reach scientific independence at an earlier stage, but also that they can have some structured training within their graduation phase. Typically, an award in this funding line was between 1 and 2.5 million per year. The second funding line, and in terms of the amount of funding used, with 300 million per year in total, was the clusters of excellence. Clusters are really centers. They are located essentially at one university. All the funding goes to this one university. Then it can distribute part of that to partners within the cluster. And the typical cluster has between 100 and 300 scientists at all levels of expertise working there. Of course, also technicians and whatever may be needed, but graduate students, postdocs, junior research groups, and full professors working together under a common topic. And we had and still have 43 of these clusters of excellence running. And then any university which had at least one graduate school and at least one such cluster of excellence was eligible for the so-called institutional strategy, which sometimes is simply just called Excellence University, and as you will learn later, it's now really called Universities of Excellence funding line. So 11 universities have been selected to receive this additional funding of 10 to 13 million euro per year, which is not really that much considering the total budget of the university, which can go into several hundred million euros. But it also has a very high symbolic value, and it is additional money which the rectorate can use to really strengthen the governance in the university, to really strengthen the management in the university, and to give it to particular areas of research which fit well into the strategic plan of the university. This funding line is being administered by the Wissenschaftsrat, the German Council of Science and Humanities. The other two funding lines are administered by the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, and we work together in this type of program. For all three funding lines, there was very little specification. It was an opportunity for the universities to develop their own strategies. It was a challenge for the universities to analyze their strengths and weaknesses and then come up with a plan based on their specific situation, including the development of the university as a whole. And at the same time, it was a free competition with no quota, for example, for some regions like North or South or East and or West. No quota for disciplines, but all the proposals were just put on the table, and then there was no discussion about how much do we want to give to biology and how much do we want to give to linguistics, but there was only a discussion about how good is this proposal and how good is that proposal. The criteria for this competition have been published well in advance, such that everybody knew what they are getting into. And essentially, the criteria was the quality of the research plan presented, the originality, the quality of the researchers themselves, then the quality of the structures and strategies, for example, strategies how they want to hire new faculty with the funding from the program, how they want to advertise their postdoc and graduate student positions, how they want to manage the program, and then the research environment, which includes how do they cooperate with partners in the region and with partners worldwide. Now, what did we find? What were the outcomes of this 10 years of funding? Well, first of all, of course, it was exciting new research, many top-level papers. But on a structural level, it was stronger interdisciplinary cooperation, because that was also our criterion to really to put together different disciplines and to make that fruitful. And then with a 5-year funding period and such a large amount of funding, there were large opportunities for innovation. You could try experiments. Not every experiment has to be successful, but some of them are, and then you build on that. We encourage new ways of cooperation between universities and other research institutions like, Max Planck, Helmholtz, Fraunhofer, Leibniz institutes. Recruitment in Germany was not, as a matter of course, international, but now it is more international, and certainly within this initiative the recruitment was very international. Almost 6,000 new positions have been created with this initiative, and among them 360 full professors hired with funding from this initiative, and roughly half of them came from outside of Germany. And that's excellent, considering that on the average less than 10% of professors in Germany are hired from abroad. And similarly, for example, for the junior research group leaders, 1/3 of them were attracted from outside of Germany. It certainly helped that within this initiative, new models of career development were practiced. Tenure track was not a common concept in Germany before the initiative, and it is a very common concept now. Mentoring was not a matter of course before the initiative, and mentoring at all levels, from graduate student level through the postdocs and junior professors, is now much more widespread. Team-oriented supervision, gender equality is a problem in the German research system. We have only 20% women professors, and one aim of the initiative was also to promote this. With this aim we have been partially successful. It needs a lot of more effort and long-term development to achieve even more in that respect. Functional differentiation, yes, has been achieved. There is now a kind of map of Germany with the excellence projects, and these are very visible, and there are research universities and other universities focusing on different aims. Certainly there now is much more strategic planning in the universities in Germany. The rector or the president of a university is not just administrating the university, but is really pushing the university forward, is together with his and her colleagues developing strategies for the university based on a critical analysis on strengths and weaknesses. And yes, we did find increased international visibility. Of course, with projects of this size, we also found challenges and problems. For example, if you have such a cluster of excellence, then it can be difficult to build this into the structure of the university. If you have funding for 5 years, it can be difficult if then it's discontinued. What will remain after the end of funding? If you get funding for 5 or for 10 years, then you have to be very careful with fixed-term recruitments and with permanent recruitments. If you focus so much on top-level research, you have to be careful not to neglect teaching. So, for example, the newly hired professors should all also contribute to teaching. They should be visible to the students, such that they also have a benefit from this initiative. Then, of course, it can be unfair to judge the quality of a university based only on the criterion whether they are in or not in this or that funding line. Of course, we also knew that changes in the legal framework need time, and also the changes required, for example, to establish tenure track in the German research system takes time and is still going on. As I mentioned, increasing the number of female researchers is a long-term project. And then, of course, when our government asked us, after almost 10 years of funding, now what have been the outcomes, as I just in the previous slide showed you some of them, it was a challenge for us to measure the success of such initiative. There's always a temptation to just count publications or anything, but anything quantitative, and we did some of that, but thank you. We did some of that, but the most important evaluation of the success of the initiative was maybe the midterm evaluation, which took place in 2012, where all the projects funded in the first phase of the initiative competed with very many excellent new projects trying to get into the program, and we found with the international peer review that roughly 85% of the ongoing projects were rated as very successful and were then continued, and 15% dropped out, but the peer review showed that most of the investment was really well placed. Now, the excellence strategy is the next phase. It starts in 2018, and it builds on the dynamics generated by the excellence initiatives in the first 2 phases. It does maintain the level of funding, which is very important, and it comes with the same philosophy of free painting and free competition. One lesson we learned is that 5 years is a good funding period, but it's really not quite long enough for projects of that size to be fruitful and to show their results. So we are happy to now have 7 years of funding period, and only after 7 years there will be the next round of competition. And the program as such is no longer an initiative, which means fixed term, but it is a strategy, and in principle it's unlimited. Each individual project, of course, has a finite lifetime and has to apply for an extension if they want to, but the program as such is not limited anymore. We have learned that it's a challenge for the university to really adopt to such a strategy. So now there is not only an overhead component of the funding, but there also is a new university allowance, and both elements go directly to the university, but still, of course, the main part of the funding goes to the team of researchers doing the research. We had 3 funding lines previously. Now it's focused on 2 funding lines. The graduate schools have been very successful. They have been so successful that they don't need additional support by DFG anymore, but the concept of a graduate school is now, other than 15 years ago, is now quite widespread, and the universities can do this on their own. The second funding line, University of Excellence, again, 11 of them will be selected in 2018. And some of those funded now may be successful and continue to be universities of excellence. Others will drop out, and new universities may achieve that level of excellence. And in the previous excellence initiative, the condition was to have at least 1 graduate school and 1 cluster. Now the condition is to have at least 2 clusters, which is really tough, and not too many universities will be able to achieve that. Well, we hope, of course, to strengthen the research landscape in Germany such that in 2030 we will look back and find a very strong, internationally competitive landscape. And I just want to highlight the last point on this slide. It's very important, and one of the previous speakers also mentioned that, to be well appreciated by society. After all, the funding for the university system comes from the taxpayer. After all the students going to universities reflect the society, and it's important to embed all these projects and to embed the universities in the society, and that's also why we require all of these projects to be very active in public outreach, in science communication. Well, thank you very much. And if you have questions, we can either you can have the opportunity now or maybe later after my colleague Oliver Wiegner has given his presentation. Thank you.
So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to give you this short talk about operational aspects of the Excellence Initiative, and I try to, can lead you through this in this 20 minutes talk, doing that in 2 parts. So talking about the perspective of a funding agency looking at the Excellence Initiative, and also I would like to invite you to have a look at the perspective of a university being funded and being suffering from the Excellence Initiative somehow. To start, I would like to familiarize you with our decision-making process. And what I would like to point out with this presentation here is that we have 3 steps of making decisions. And this includes, first of all, of course, the scientific review. So the proposals, the draft proposals or the full proposals were handed over to specialists evaluating that. But these specialists are not the people who make the final decision, but they just evaluate that. And then we pass that to a committee or to a commission which compares or to assess these reviews which are there. But also this group does not finally do the decision, but just compares and makes probably a recommendation of funding. But the final decision is done by a third body. And we use this scheme for all our DFG funding schemes, and especially this was also used with special features within the Excellence Initiative. And this is important, that this is a multi-step process, including, as you see here, drafts and full proposal phase, so 2 times 3 steps, in order to make it very transparent, make it very fair, and make it as obvious as possible. And what we try as well is to give feedback to the applicants at more or less each of these steps, so they knew why they have been successful, they knew where they should improve in order to be successful with the full proposal after submitting perhaps a positive draft, and also they understand why they have not been successful in order to improve for the next round, in order to learn how to change the management and their research idea to understand what the criteria and what the criticism was. So this, I think, is one of the really important things. So looking at the Excellence Initiative, you see the right scheme there. This is fairly complicated, and I don't want to lead you through that. But what you again might see here, we have two phases, the draft phases and a full proposal phase. And this is so complicated because we are dealing with three funding lines, so the graduate school, the clusters of excellence, and these institutional strategies. And as my colleague Klaus Werberger just mentioned, where the DFG is administrating these evaluation processes together with a partner organization, the German Wissenschaftsrat, VR, so this is the German Council of Science and Humanity. So it became quite complicated, but what is important, I already mentioned that we have a transparent and multi-step procedure and everybody knows what they're doing. So the referees know what they do, the members of the committees know what they do, and this was communicated to the entire academic community so that they knew the conditions of the decision-making processes, they knew the criteria of the decisions, and they receive feedback. What you see here is we had a success rate of 15%. So this is quite nice to say so. So we had a fair competition, so this most paperwork done by the applicants, of course, was in vain, but however, there was a fair chance to be successful. All over, we received about 830 proposals which have been reviewed, and so roughly 115 were in the end successful, so this is a success rate of 15%, and this is even more competitive what we usually have within the DFG scheme. So this was a really tough competition for the university with high visibility, and to make this possible, as you know, more or less, or as you might imagine, all German universities were involved in this process, bringing in proposals. And so we had to choose international experts to do the evaluation. So 85% of the experts doing the evaluation, the peer review, came from abroad. And so we did that so to avoid conflicts of interest, but this has a second implication as well. We asked our referees to apply high international standards, the highest international standards. So we asked all the experts from all over the world to look very carefully whether this program and the proposals meet these international high standards. And what also happened in this process here was that they became somehow ambassadors for this program, because they came back to their countries and had the opportunity to report on what is going on in Germany, so they can explain this type of new competition and this type of momentum being somehow put to the German science system, so they can talk at their universities what's going on in Germany and see, well, Germany is somehow evolving and there are a lot of interesting research programs and there's a lot possibility for interaction. So this is at least two positive effects. So international standards, but also some type of, advertisement or publicity for the German program. What also is important, I come to that very briefly, is what we call an academically driven selection process. What means that all the decision-making bodies here were dominated by academic members. It's not political influence governing this process, no political arguments, but scientific arguments which lead the decision-making process. And to understand that better, you find here more or less the basic structure of our decision-making bodies. You see, we have two groups of members within those bodies. On the right-hand side, you see it's members of the federal state and the states, of course. We are spending tax money, so this is the political part. But as we have in Germany 16 states and one federal government, so it's only 17 members coming from this political side. And the second group are the academics on the left side, and depending on the period of this process, we had 29 or even 26 or even 39 members. So what is important here, that the academics, the scientists themselves, had the majority in the decision-making processes. So they were not influenced by regional or political or economical aspects, but the decision was more or less entirely dominated by the scientific arguments. And what you can see here in this yellow text is that the scientific members also had a set of other very important duties. So they define the funding conditions. Of course, there's a legal framework for this whole competition set up by the politicians, but the definition and the formulation of the criteria was done by academics. So they really set the criteria for the competition. They also select the drafts, which means the first selection step, where more than 50% of the applications were cut out, were done only by academics. So not a single politician was even in the room. So they really stepped back in order to leave this whole process making, this whole decision making process to the scientists, and they gave a lot of credit into this project, and this turned out to be very helpful for that. So that's what we call academic driven decision making process. So talking about the criteria, this is also important. Of course, I don't want to talk about all these criteria, but what is important here is that although it's 12 or even 13 points, they are quite simple. We're talking about research, we are talking about the people, and we are talking about the structures. So this is the major set of criteria. And what we think the Excellence Initiative should do is it should foster excellent research at an international level. And this is what our criteria is designed for, and this is also how all our templates are designed to make sure what we ask for. And of course we are asking for beneficial structure for the people doing this research. So these clusters or graduate schools at the university should provide an background, a structure which helps to do the best research. So free the people from burdens, providing excellent instrumentation, giving good management structures. And so these management structures are also an important aspect of this competition. We are not only dealing with good science, but also with a good environment in order to execute this type of science. So we would like to see that the cluster's development, organizational structures, management, and other elements in order to really support scientists with their work. When finally the decision has been done, what happened to the clusters? What happened to the graduate schools? I think what is important also here, our scientists had the opportunity to develop quite freely. So we did not expect any interim reports. So they had the flexibility and freedom and to just develop the way such they need. The only thing what we did is we had a lot of informal site visits where we traveled to the universities and we talked with the universities and the managers there about the success, about problems, about failures, about things to be changed, and how to develop the whole system. And we try to exchange experiences. And what we also organized were workshops and meetings where we invited the speakers of these large research areas to come together and to exchange their knowledge and their experience with the local condition. So what we try to establish is something like a learning system where all the really excellent partners, although they are somehow competitors within the whole system, share their problems, share their success, and discuss how to improve and how to develop the whole system. Of course, we gathered statistical data and did surveys, so we asked the universities to give us data about employment, about recruitment strategies, about gender development, about PhD thesis periods, how long they need in order to finish the work, about publication, all this type, and how about spending. But this everything was put together in order to formulate some reportings for the government. So in 2008 and 2015 we had full reports about the outcome of this initiative and reported to the government and provided something like an evaluation in order to convince the states and the federal government to continue this program. And also what is important, in 2016, Dr. Werberger just mentioned, we had an international committee which systematically evaluated success and the outcome of this program in order to make sure and to further develop this system. As we already discussed a bit, it is very important that also non-scientists understand what is doing here. So we supported the clusters and the graduate schools with their public relation activities. So the DFG did something like advertisement and publicity for the program. We informed the public about the research done here so the people can really understand and be happy and feel that there's something important done. But, well, I think I should come to the second aspect. What does the Excellence Initiative mean for the universities, for the applicants? And first of all, I would like to talk about structures. As Klaus Werberger just pointed out, the whole idea of the program was the free painting. So the universities could start where they are, and they should develop measures in order to reach a next level of performance. And of course, the universities are different. And as the federal states, on the different states in Germany are different, they started with very heterogeneous starting conditions at the universities. So they had to overcome, or they had to deal with these heterogeneous conditions there, and to build up new things in order to really make it going. So for example, we had clusters of excellence which are not more than virtual working groups. So the professors being involved in this cluster or this graduate school are just sticking into their faculties, and they just move on a regular, they just meet on a regular basis, but it's just more or less informal what they're doing. But we also had the situation at other universities where they really set up something like new institutes or new institutions with their own rights, with their own management, with their own budget responsibilities, with even the right to recruit professors. So there was a very diversity of different types how these clusters and how these schools were set up in order to answer to the specific needs at the universities. And of course, as you probably know, we all are scientists, so we are educated in order to do research, but we are not necessarily educated to do management. And what happened here when these large-scale funding proposals came there and had to be run, they suddenly recognized that they need to have certain develop new traditions of communicating with each other, and how to run such a cluster consisting of 10, 20 or even 150 individual PIs with their own needs. And so they had to somehow calibrate between very strong leading mechanisms, so dictatorship, or whether you would like to apply very democratic aspects in order to get this managed. And all this had to be developed in a very short time, so this causes a lot of thinking and communication in these clusters. And as Dr. Werberger just mentioned, 6,000 people had been hired and 360 professors came new to the universities. This is also a problem of infrastructure, because the funds couldn't be used to build new buildings, so the university had to find space for all these new researchers in a very brief time, and they had to provide the equipment which is necessary in order to do this type of research. And this leads me to the next part of my talk. It's about governance and communication, which we thought and which we learned is especially very important for the management of the universities. The establishment, I just mentioned that, challenges the universities, but also challenges the leading scientists in these clusters. And so they had to develop new proceedings of interacting with each other. And this, of course, had the effect of what we call centrifugal forces, because these new clusters, these new graduate schools were thought to be excellent, and they want to speed up, they want to develop something, they want to do new things, but the rest of the university somehow has to go on as it always went on, and they were taught not to be excellent, and of course this causes tension, and you have to communicate and make sure that the university, the whole university develops, and not only these parts of the university which are thought to be excellent. And so the university had to change somehow also its management. It has to make sure that there are parts in universities which are able to really support these innovative structures, and the university and the administration of the university had to improve in that way that it could not continue as usual, but had to speed up and find new mechanisms in order to support these newly entities here. And what is also important is that as the whole competition made it necessary that the university really develop plans, strategic plans, in order to develop themselves. So they really have to find communication ways in order to really do this type of priority setting. And setting priorities always mean that you also set posteriorities, and this of course is not easy for those universities, for all universities in Germany in that time, and so you needed new organizational units, and you have to new management aspects in these universities. So this leads me to the conclusion that it is important to communicate a lot in these universities and to give the opportunity to participate in these projects. And so lots of these graduate schools and clusters have been organized as large networks, like a spider in a network, so trying to interact with a lot of people. So it had not been a closed shop, but these clusters and these graduate schools mainly had been open for the participation of other disciplines. And this is very important, that these elements were very interdisciplinary, so you really can bring in scientists from all different disciplines in order to ask new questions in molecular medicine, or in biology questions, or in engineering science and computer science. So you really, what we learned from this project, that it was very successful in bringing people together from interdisciplinary, and to bring them all there, to let them participate, and that leads to a new type of, partially at least, of identification with these units and with the whole university, so the people came proud of that. And of course, the universities are somehow embedded in a legal framework, and this legal framework is not always beneficial for universities, as you probably all suffer every day. So this competition being set up made it necessary that also the legal framework was changed, and the university had good arguments to really say to the politician, we need new regulation in order to speed up, for example, our recruitment strategies. Some of the universities had mergers with non-university partners, and also for that we need specific new rules for legislation, and all this was made possible due to this process. And this one this is a complicated chart here. What I would like to draw your attention to are these light blue and dark blue columns here. And what you see is these light blue things were things which were new activities of the university, and the dark blues are, well, enhanced activities due to the funding. And we asked our speakers of the clusters and gratitudes with respect to research performance and internationalization, what they did, and well, they all enhanced their activity in international recruitment, in organization of international workshop, in financial support for conference participation at an international level. And they had new positions for early careers researchers. So this fresh money fostered a lot of new activities at the universities which they so far did not do. So this was the major, well, element of innovation, that they really have free money to do things they always dreamed of, and they could hire fresh personnel and bring these things forward. Well, this will be my last slide, and what I would like to point out that we were fairly successful in attracting scientists from all over the world. And what you can see perhaps here is, for example, when you look at Brazil, that the majority, well, looking at Latin America, the majority of scientists being attracted came from Brazil to the German Excellence clusters. And we are very happy to have these data, and you can see the Excellence Initiative attracted scientists from all over the world, and we hope to continue with this aspect in the next funding round, but still there will be a lot of exchange enabled by this program. And so I would like to thank you for your attention. I think our both talks are now open for discussion.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank DFG for the opportunity to learn more about the German Academic Excellence Initiative. My special thanks to Catherine, Professor Klaus, and Professor Oliver to be in Brazil, it to be in USP. As you know, I'm not from CAPES, and I don't speak on behalf of CAPES. So I will make a short presentation based on the visits of Professor Coni and Professor Abilio to USP, my participation in the task force in order to generate the CAPES call published last week regarding the internationalization of Brazilian universities, and also recent reports published in Brazilian newspapers. The motivation in order to create the program was due to the vision of CAPES International Office about the universities in Brazil. This slide is from Professor Coni, showing lacking international leadership, visibility, long-term strategy to change this situation, lack of commitment to the needs of the society, and few relations with private companies in Brazil. On the international scene, several countries, Europeans, Asians, and from Middle East, are carrying out programs designed to increase the quality of their universities. And these countries are already showing very nice results. Germany is perhaps the best example. Then, as you can see, France also, they have a program very similar to the German program. CAPES planning involves 4 steps. The first one has already started, and the other 3 are expected for the next month. Concerning the first step, namely print, it will be finalized on April 12, 2018. At the time, the university must present a proposal for internationalization. And USP will have a plan, must have a plan to apply for this call until April. I have talked to Professor Vahan, and probably we are going to create a task force to work with Alcani and Provost of Graduate Studies and Research to have a good plan for USP to present for this call. Important points must be considered in this call. It foresees that 40 universities will be chosen. The focus will be on graduation, postdoctoral and teachers' mobility, and research projects made with international universities. The budget for the first step is 300 million reais per year, and the important point that must be emphasized is the participation of university in the definition of the destination of mobility, as well the prioritization of the different participants. For example, it's possible to focus the participation of graduate students or focus on participation of research professor, or even balance this participation. The second step will be the creation of private fund with a forecast of 2 billion reais per year. I guess it's very similar to amount that Germany puts in your program. The fund will be created by 1% of the profit that companies controlled by the federal agents have to expend by law in science and technology. So you can see in this square the formation of this fund based on the 1% of the profit of these companies. Usually companies relate with telecommunication, bioenergy, oil, gas. So it's expected that this profit can make this fund. Currently, these funds are poorly applied and often returns to the national treasury. Professor Abilio told us yesterday that more than 50% of this money that should go to research and university goes to the federal treasury. So we are lacking this huge amount of money. Step 3 and 4 are very similar to the German model already presented. The details of the Brazilian project are not yet known, but should include a cluster of laboratories and some university of excellence. We don't have the numbers, but the idea is the same that we have seen in Germany. Private funding will facilitate investment. This fund will be private. It's not a fund from CAPES or CNPq. It's a private fund. So the private fund will facilitate investment and will be applying mobility. Research projects also include hiring staff. I see some problems that may arise in the implementation of this proposal by CAPES in Brazil. The resistance of the academic community in accepting that some laboratories and universities will have special funding. I guess Professor Krieger told in the beginning he thinks similar to me, and the tendency of the politicians to lobby for their electoral regions. I know in Germany you don't have this problem, but in Brazil the politicians are a huge problem for the academia. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to the speakers. You can keep your place there, and I would like to invite Professor Vahan Agopian to present the perspective of our university, the University of São Paulo, on the Brazilian Excellence Program.
Morning again. I've got 5 minutes to present the perspectives of University of São Paulo. First of all, I have to point out that I'm really a strong supporter from this type of initiative, and I will do my best to make sure that we'll get something similar in Brazil. As you know, and Raul Machado has just explained that the German university model is very important for us in Brazil. And University of São Paulo was really designed based on German model, German approach. That's a very important point to start. And nowadays we are very sure about the quality and the relevance of the German university system. And I hope, that's why I hope that we manage to follow this new approach. The German Excellence Initiative is a model that must be pursued in Brazil, and it's done by several countries in Europe, Asia, and Pacific area. And I'm sure that this must be pursued because it is really a model that makes this old system, the whole system, more efficient. Carlotte has just presented some difficulties we are finding in Brazil. Maybe because of misunderstanding what is excellence initiative approach. We know that this approach is very important for the system, but maybe some of our colleagues or some of our politicians, they believe that this initiative gives privileges for a small number of universities or a small number of research groups, which is not correct. I go through some of your results, and it's very clear for us, for me and my colleagues here at USP, that this initiative helps to create references, helps to create models, helps to create some goals for all of for whole system. So everyone, all of the institutions, all of the research groups will get benefits. This is very difficult, and Carlotte was very clear to tell us, it's very difficult to explain to our colleagues. But maybe, and I'm sure that we are getting your results more probably, but the result is you've proved that if, let's just say, one of the indexes in a university, and an excellent university has increased, the same index has increased in other universities not supported by this initiative. So this, I think, is our major challenge, to show that excellence is good for everyone. Okay, thank you very much, and I hope that in the future we will be able to have something similar here. Thank you.
Yes, so now it's time for questions. I think that we can open the floor, and please. Do we have microphones? Yes, please. Yes, please.
And all of them agree that it's important to give financial support for big groups doing interesting research and expensive research. But now, as my personal opinion, diversity in sciences is crucial. If we take, for instance, physics, right? Einstein was the person who gave the greatest contribution to physics in the last 200 years, probably. And he was doing a research by himself. Could not be classified in any way as a group research. Could not fit in any big group. So it's important that we, and I say maybe Germany and also Brazil, do not forget that we must have money for excellence groups or etc., but we cannot forget these individuals who do the research by themselves.
Yeah, thank you very much for that very good comment, which reflects indeed the need also recognized by DFG. We have not cut our other research programs in order to finance the Excellence Initiative, but all the other research programs providing individual grants, providing fellowships, providing smaller research units, providing just support for travel and whatever may be needed, are going on very strongly and have also been increased continuously over the last years. So yes, the opportunities for the individual researcher are very, very important, and we try to foster that diversity. And also within the big projects have a lot of flexibility within the funding. They are not obliged to follow the plans which have been laid down several years ago, but they can go into new directions which become important. So there is more diversity within such a project than one might imagine from the outside.
May I just make a comment? But I'm not saying the funding agencies are wrong in this direction, but even the universities, sometimes they focus on these big projects. And that's a question. Maybe I talked to 3 German scientists. 3 of them said the same. Diversity of areas of science in Germany is going down. Do you have any maybe it's a particular opinion, only 3 people. Right? Do you have any measurement of that, or because maybe it is an undesirable outcome of the universities focusing on the big projects?
Indeed, there is a danger of university leadership focusing only on the big projects. That, for example, is the reason why we publish information on all projects, also the small projects, online at any time. University leadership gets overviews of all the individual grants, and the sum of individual grants at any university in Germany is more than what is coming through the coordinated programs. And it's very important to highlight this. For example, when a university presents its success, yes, there is a tendency to highlight only the big projects, but what we observe, for example, now is that universities also tend to include grants which come from the European Research Council. And these are individual grants, but they are very prestigious individual grants, and they are also very important. So yes, we see both tendencies, and we are not too happy if the focus is only on this big format. We try to also develop our funding, our other funding programs, such that they can adapt to what is needed in the future.
Perhaps just another comment here. Of course, you have to think of the whole system of funding in Germany in this case. The Excellence Initiative is, as Dr. Werberger just mentioned in his talk, 15% of the DFG funding, but there are also other funding agencies which fund in Germany. And yes, the Excellence Initiative gives strong incentives for large-scale research of larger groups. And of course, this changes the landscape somehow. And what I called these imbalances within the system, or these challenges for the university management. This is true, but to understand, you have to understand that the Excellence Initiative was made to help the universities to profile, to strengthen their strengths in order to be competitive on an international level. And this means, of course, priority setting, and of course there's the danger of losing diversity of research. This has to be really carefully balanced. But the Excellence Initiative is not the program to balance that, but to push the very strong ones. And of course there have to be mechanisms in order to balance that. We totally agree there.
I made this question in private, but I would like to do in public also. What was the impact of this program in the university and laboratories that don't participate of this initiative in Germany? And the second question, what is the percentage of the budget of this program if you compare with the total budget of a German university?
The total budget of the German, in the German university system is roughly 15,000 million, 15 billion euros, and the Excellence Initiative is roughly 500 million. So it is a couple of percent ratio between the Excellence Initiative funding and the total funding going to the German university system. Now about impact on universities not funded, we see that also the universities which were not funded have looked at their strategies, have developed plans. And even those who submitted plans and did not get funding looked at the response they got. We provided full information on the evaluation results with all the details. And they looked at that, and then they decided how to proceed. And certainly they have not been able to realize all their aims, but very often we observe that with support from the state and within other funding programs, they have been able to realize the most important parts of their plans. So in that sense, yes, the Excellence Initiative gives direct support to only some, but it really raises the overall quality of research.
Here. So I'm Paulo Nossensweig from the Physics Institute. I'd like to make a few comments and then ask a question. I think one of the major points is that this plan was a plan to redesign, reshape the landscape of research of the universities in Germany. Your country has a relatively different situation from ours in the way the universities work. There's central planning, central hiring, which is not the way it works here. Each university here hires with individual processes, different processes, their own faculty. And so from what you showed, I see there was a big change and increase in hiring, and also hiring from other countries that you didn't have before, and the tenure track and everything, you changed a lot. I think that we cannot directly apply your initiative in Brazil because the way the universities are different, are independent from each other. However, I would like for this plan to draw on the idea of reshaping the landscape, and I think we are deeply in need of that here in this country. I see part of this initiative as the result of a crisis. Our funding level for research is at an unprecedented low in this country. And the fact that if the money goes into the federal government, there are restrictions that apply that make spending the money very difficult. So I was here also when this proposal was presented, and I think it's really important. It's creative. It's thinking out of the box. If we want to change the landscape, we need substantial changes, and one of the changes that I think is a challenge for our future president, changing governance mechanisms in the university. With the current governance mechanisms, we're doomed, basically. I would like to also comment that making such big changes requires thinking outside of the box, requires being bold, but also I think the idea of doing this through excellence initiatives is you have to build on your strengths. And an excellence initiative is precisely a way of recognizing our strengths and where we should inject money to set the good examples. Even though a lot of this will be done through collaborative networks, the role of the individual researchers, I think, is never lost in these networks. So finally, the question would be, based on your experience on the changes in governance that were made in Germany, would you have suggestions for us, points that we should really focus on if we want to change the governance in our universities? Where should we start?
Let me first comment on your first comment about the hiring. Maybe this is a misunderstanding. In Germany, the universities are independent in their hiring policy, and the individual departments hire the professors with the consent of the leadership and within the strategic plan of the university. Now, do we have, maybe we have some impressions from our short visit about the research landscape and the funding situation in Brazil, but it would be overestimating the depth of our impressions to give advice on how you should adapt your excellence initiative to the situation in Brazil. I've learned quite a few differences, and certainly one thing I think is really important and which you are addressing is internationalization. We are happy to have many international students in Germany. It's not so easy because of the language barrier, but teaching at universities is becoming more and more international, and many courses are given in English, certainly at the graduate and postgraduate level. It's typical for researchers in Germany to spend some time abroad in their career early on and in different phases again and again. And this maybe is something which could also really be an important element of your initiative.
Thank you for the presentations. I also believe very much in the network system that will aggregate immersion people in the references groups. I very much believe that we can recognize talents having networks. And networks, I think, is a key piece of the reference money in one specific cluster. Yes, it is. My question is a little bit more political. In terms of perspective, how do you, what's the German vision and long term? You're going to sustain this type of program forever, or, and this is important for us. Our consistency in supporting different activities is not the same type of German system. Okay.
Yeah, that's certainly a major difference we also observe, and we are really happy to have had stability in our funding situation for the last 20 years at least. We have had steady increases in, of the investment by the government in research and development, something like 3%, 5% each year. We had 5-year planning periods where the government guaranteed, yes, for the next 5 years you will get 3% or 5% of increase each year. And then in 2005 we had that additional excellence initiative which came on top. Then we had the introduction of overhead, which was coming together with the excellence initiative and was one of the elements which then entered into all our funding programs with additional funding, not out of the previous budget. And we observe that stability is a very important element. If you want to attract high-level researchers and to keep them in research, you need to offer them a perspective both on an institutional level and on an individual level.
Okay. May I, another question for Catherine? Yes, of course. Okay, thank you. Catherine, in terms of goals, how pleased you are with the FEG in São Paulo, and what else could we do together to help the FG, to help us, and to help both sides?
Yeah. I think, as I said before, what I mean, we are very satisfied with our collaboration with FAPES. We are very satisfied that we have this event today together with you, and I think this would be having more events of not really this kind, but on maybe scientific workshops or any promoting measures for promoting our initiatives, which we can offer together with FAPES for joint collaboration, would be very helpful. And I think we could, on the basis of the fact that the state of São Paulo is the strongest state in research, not only in economy but also in research, and has still quite some funding potential, I think we could do much better in the state of São Paulo for promoting research projects between Germans and people from the state, scientists from the state of São Paulo, scientists from USP. I think this would be very helpful if we could find, also on the basis of our collaboration together with you at USP, if you could find instruments for advertising more and more, and also for figuring out maybe new collaborative initiatives, activities, in order to seed collaboration and to have more of those projects, such as the International Research Training Group. I think this would be very, very, very nice. Then this kind of instrument is a very sustainable instrument for international collaboration as well.
Thank you for your presentations. I would like to ask, how do you treat the direction of the excellence program in Germany? Do you build on excellence that is already existence, or you have mechanisms to build new excellence, like for not only for young people but for new areas? Do you aim certain areas for the country as a strategy, political strategy, as Professor Raoul said?
Yes, thank you for that question. We don't within the Excellence Initiative. This is open to all areas of science, and it's just a matter of academic excellence. Of course, there are other programs like directly supported by the ministry, which are targeted on specific technologies and which have specific aims, but not in this segment of funding. Also, I would like to mention that, yes, the clusters of excellence, for example, they build on existing strengths, and in most places where we are now funding a cluster of excellence, we are also funding some smaller centers like the collaborative research centers. We have research training groups and so on in the same or in neighboring fields, and together they build the strengths of research in this field at this university.
Just a clarification, the Fraunhofer and the Max Planck Institutes are also included. It's not only universities.
Yes, they cannot apply for funding directly, only universities can apply, but universities can then give part of the funding to Max Planck, Fraunhofer and other institutes in exchange for a contribution to the common research program.
But the Max Planck and the Fraunhofer cannot apply themselves.
They cannot apply themselves, yes. This is a program to strengthen the universities.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much for this excellent discussion and presentations. I have a question to Dr. Oliver Weiner. When you mentioned, I'm Professor Mauricio Batista from International Office. When you mentioned the governance of the clusters could be dictatorship or democracy, I'm curious which one have been chosen and if this has any relation with the success of the cluster.
No, this has not been a criterion, but well, they have been chosen due to their innovation and due to their scientific impact, as it has been evaluated by the international reviews. And the clusters had to find their own structures with respect to the specific situation where they are. And the situation in the life science department, for example, or the medicine is completely different from the situation in a humanities or social science department. So the way of dealing with these types of questions is strongly correlated with the people being involved. They have to find their way, and I think one of the strengths of the program is that we do not define any prerequisites for that, but it should be effective, it should be productive in terms of science and output in research, in providing the best condition for that specific situation. And of course we observe that some of those clusters starting as basic democratic things somehow turned out to be more centralized with a strong speaker and a strong, well, somehow editorial or some board really governed these structures. But what they always did, they had an advisory board from experts from abroad who helped them in doing these types of decisions in order to legitimate what they actually did in order to discuss that. And so one of the major things is really try to integrate the major players and make it plausible what they're doing. I think this can be done, but there's no single answer.
Yeah, maybe I just add, yes, there is no recipe for success, but it's quite clear a cluster of excellence is not a one-man show. But also it's not a democratic body.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm Marilia Zeeländer, and I'd like to ask you, it's a bit adding to this last question. So you say that you do not demand reports, but that you would visit these clusters. So would you, what would you expect to be the level, the degree of interference? Would you really apply some concepts or demand certain conducts from the clusters? When would you interfere with something that you perhaps do not agree with?
we would not interfere. We would encourage, we would give advice if we are asked, but these projects have been selected in a very tough competition, and they know what they are doing. So typically they don't really need much guidance from us. We can give them examples how others deal with certain problems, and then they can think about it. They all have their advisory boards, as my colleague mentioned. So it's really such that we from the funding agency do not have much interference on the way they proceed. But after 5 years, then there is a full evaluation of the results, and that again is organized by us, but the evaluation is done by scientists, colleagues, peer review.
Perhaps the only things there, of course, there are some rules how they were allowed to spend the money, and of course we take care that these rules were taken into account, but this I think is, well, quite easily understandable.
Okay, just before passing to the microphone to Professor Carlotti, just a very quick last question. You mentioned interdisciplinarity that is behind all these excellence. And I would like to know if you have any strategies or what kind of implementation you do to transdisciplinarity, let's say in order to reschedule this landscape of research. And then, because I saw in your charts how well you are trying to counterbalance social sciences with science, hard sciences, and so on. So is there any systemic way of transdisciplinarity in order to create this network?
So we strongly believe that interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity is not a value as such, but research, good performance of research is the value. So we do not explicitly foster interdisciplinarity, but we say, dream of what you want to do, have your plans, do what you need in order to reach new goals in science. And so what we saw is that this initiative fostered really cooperation between working groups which were next to each other and never talked to each other. And suddenly there was an incentive and there was the money to try things you never dared to do so far, because you do not really explicitly have to apply for that, but you have only the overall gain. So this is perhaps important to understand. These clusters, they receive free money for their basic idea, and they were free to distribute this money according to their needs, and they have something what we call seed funding. So they just have free money to play around and do things they never do, and to foster cooperation and communication between each other, and this helps a lot. And so we see that the majority of these projects are not even from one large area, but they always bridge 2 or even 3 areas. So from life science to engineering science to social science, or from computer science integrating material science. So the majority of those projects are very, very interdisciplinary, but not because we expect them to be interdisciplinary, but we expect them to be good.
Thank you very much. So Professor Carlotti, I think it's good to wrap up.
Thank you, Laura. I would like to close this event. And the idea of this workshop was to better know the German initiative and help us to build our own strategy to have better science in Brazil. And I would like to point out two aspects for USP. The first one is the role of USP in this process. I think we should support strongly CAPES, not only to have more money from the federal government or for the funder to USP, but to change the scenario, to change the landscape of research in Brazil. For example, change our framework, legal framework, to change our governance of our universities. So we have many positive aspects that I see, not only the money, but the whole change that we can have in this process. Is the second point is the ongoing call of CAPES. I would like to send to CAPES in April the best plan of internationalization in Brazil. So I hope that all of you can help us to have a good plan to send it to our next president, and then to send it to CAPES in April. So thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Professor Raul. Thank you, Catherine, for all your help for organizing this event. Thank you very much.
Laura, I just want to stress my thanks, many thanks for you for coming here to give this presentation. And I'm sure that they were very important for us to better understand the German initiative, to better solve our questions, and I'm sure this will help us to avoid misunderstanding, even prejudice with this type of initiatives. Thank you very much indeed.